Lincoln City Urban Renewal Agency meeting. Roll call, please.
Jim Davis, he's
excused.
Excused. Chester Norikis.
Here.
Wes Ryan.
Here.
Roger Sprague.
Here.
Susan Wolke.
Here.
Kip Ward.
Here.
And Don Williams.
Here.
We have the room for comments from citizens. We have one person who's not staff, two people actually. We have the media, but we have one person who's not staff. Would you like to say anything, Mr. Price? All right, we'll go on. We have before us the minutes of December 8th, 2014 and December 22nd, 2014. What's the pleasure of the agency? Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried. Let's see here. I'm sorry, I had brought up the wrong one here on my computer. Yeah, the minutes that we have to approve are February 9th. Yes. So I'm going to see if there's any changes or additions to those minutes. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Special orders of business. D-Lake Undergrounding. Mr. Olson.
Good evening. As an update probably mostly for the folks that are watching on TV, the agency initiated the D-Lake Undergrounding project that provided the design and engineering to do the undergrounding on Highway 101 from about Northwest 2nd Avenue Drive to Southwest Ebb Avenue, crossing beneath the D River. To simplify the project a little bit, we divided it into two projects. One is to underground all the wiring in the intersection at First Street, which basically was a complete upgrade of the traffic signal. So now that project's done, and the traffic heads are on mast arms instead of wires. And so the second project then was to do the rest of the undergrounding. In your staff report, I think you have a chronology that Alison has provided for how the project has proceeded. So one of the problems that we've had to deal with is not just necessarily designing the ditches that need to be done, but coordinating that effort with the businesses, the Kylo's restaurant, the state park, and the motel along the side of the street, because the biggest part of the project is going to be the bore under the D River, and as you have followed, that bore is going to be about 12 feet below the surface of the river. They have to start in the Kylo's parking lot, and so immediately bore down to be 12 feet under the river and then come back up in the state park. So that's a little bit of a tricky situation. It isn't just a traditional straight bore. As the project got larger and larger, it seemed like everybody wanted another conduit in the pipe. The pipe got to be about 32 inches in diameter, and at that point the contractor that was consulting with the design engineer said, that's just getting to be too crazy. It would be better if you did 2 or 3 bores instead of one huge bore like that. They couldn't get that big of a steel pipe to make those kinds of bends. So they divided it up, and there will be 3 bores. There would be each of the 6-inch pipes will be bored. I think there's a couple of those, and then there's the rest will be just clumped together, a bunch of 2-inch pipes that'll be clumped together. Now at the projects, the plans for the project and the specifications are now complete. We do have some drawings. We have all of the bidding information that we need to do it. We have an updated engineer's estimate of $1.5 million. However, that's for the construction of the project. That doesn't include the reimbursements to the utilities. And as you know, to the best of our knowledge, there's only one utility whose franchise requires them to pay for that cost. And so we would be picking up the cost of all of the utilities to do the work that they have to do. We provide the conduit, they come in and do the work, but we have to pay them to do it. The major one, obviously, is Pacific Power. They would contract that work out. They normally contract that work out The other utilities often have their own crews that do the wire pulling and set up the pedestals and that sort of thing. So the next step in the process, we're
Pardon me, Kurt.
Yeah, sure.
Given our experience with undergrounding in Ocean Lake, do we have any estimate on what utilities are going to cost?
The biggest one, as I said, is going to be Pacific Power, and that seems to range somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000. The rest of them will be under that, significantly under that.
And there are how many
So
others?
there's Charter Cable, there's CenturyLink, there's Coastcom, which is a fiber optic. ODOT has a line, a connector between all of the traffic signals on Highway 101 that kind of coordinates if you're going to platoon through town. I might be missing one, but they wouldn't be a big player. Those are the big players.
So 5 or so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So in addition now, we're sort of at a next step in the process. Now we got the plans, we know what they look like, we can start applying for permits. Before we couldn't really get permits or easements because we didn't know exactly where things were going to go all the way through the project. There'd be some little change, and so that changed where the easement would need to be. And so we are now at that stage where we can start applying for permits and easements. But this is a significant project, and so being at a milestone process and with 4 new city members on the agency, we thought maybe it would be good to have an opportunity to discuss the project a little bit and make sure that the process forward was clear. So that's why we put it on the agenda tonight, and we want to be able to answer questions and have a discussion about the future of the project.
We are budgeted for this, right?
We are budgeted for this.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, any questions or discussion? I guess not.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. A couple of items. If we paid for the engineering study, is that correct?
Yes.
So how long is that study good for?
Well, if the project was to be delayed, I'm sure that there would be quite a few years that it would continue to be good information. At some point, it probably have to be reevaluated in case there were some changes into what was required here and there. But basically, the engineering has a layout for the trenches and what poles will be down and which poles wouldn't be. And so that wouldn't change much if the project didn't happen immediately.
Mr. Nourakis.
How much of it we got into the project at this point?
About 10% of our estimate of the cost of the project, so that's about $150,000.
Kip?
You mentioned that you're going to have other utilities going through there besides just electricity. For example, cable and telephone. I don't own a telephone, I don't think, and besides the one that's in my pocket, and cable's going by the wayside. Is there any savings that we can have by postponing this a little bit? I mean, otherwise you're just burying cable and phone. Is there a chance that you'd just be burying cable and phone for something that's doomed to be a dead wire, like VCRs or something?
I haven't heard that discussion from any of the utilities saying that what they have now is going to be significantly different. It certainly could be. It does seem like there's probably less people using those two utilities in particular, but I don't have information about that.
Any other questions? Do you want a decision from this panel as to whether we proceed or not?
Well, I think a thumbs up would be in order, or if there isn't a thumbs down, then I guess we're still working on it.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to move that we direct staff to bring options to the agency regarding what we can do with this project.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'm curious what you mean by options. The options would be either continue, delay, till whenever, or options that we would do. And most of this, if I understand this, most of the bulk of the work actually will not happen in this fiscal year. It will be in next fiscal year anyway.
That's correct.
By having them bring back options, wondering if there's another option.
Well, I was hoping for more input from new council members, as well as old, plus we're missing a council member, so I'd like to include him in the process if possible. In terms of options, those three that you've laid out, I suppose, are the options that we have, Kurt, just to
I think so.
continue or stall or stop.
Yeah, nothing's coming to mind like, oh yeah, let's move them 3 blocks over on,
Right.
or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah. In this particular location, where that's the only location, so there wouldn't be another location option. So probably you're right.
Yes.
Mr. Chandler.
Would you like options on other projects, or just options as it is associated with this construction?
My motion had to do with this project only.
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
I guess I'm in a quandary because we've really been working on this. We had originally wanted both sides done. We finally decided just to have one side done. I understand the trepidation, but this is something that, for the most part, most of the residents have wanted for a long time. I got the impression there are a few that don't. They think it's a total waste of money, but I think, and the businesses in the area, if I remember correctly, are all on board with this. They wanted it at slack time, as far as I've heard, so it disrupts their business as little as possible. So, unless you have other information on that.
No, I don't. There aren't any businesses that are obviously that don't want it to happen. You're right. There's probably just the two that are really most affected that are on the east side, because any of the businesses that are on the west side which there's only a couple there too, are beyond the wire. So
Right.
It's the motels on the east side that are going to be the most benefited by the project.
And again, just to continue, we can still vote on it.
Sure.
I see no high value because we still have to go through and get all the permits. It's going to be several months down the road, or we'll have all the permits, as well as the project itself cannot happen until this fall or late this fall, as I understand it, because of business and so on and so forth. So I think at this point, we may run into a real hamstrung item as far as one of the permits that's going to delay it anyway. So I just don't see any value in having them come back with more options at this point. I would rather, my personal opinion is let's proceed. But again, that's under discussion before we vote on the motion.
Kurt, as I remember, the way that the plan has developed, first of all, it was to be both sides, then it was one side, and then now it's back to both sides with a shorter on the east side. But there's some of that coming off on the east side, and so that is being moved to the other side, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. We were able to get a section on the east side undergrounded as part of this project. The biggest issue with that turned out to be replacing the cost that it was going to be for us if we didn't do it. We'd have to replace all of those poles with freestanding steel poles, because right now all of the poles on the east side around that corner are being guyed across the street to a pole. And if we remove all the poles on the west side, there's nowhere to guy those poles to, and so they would require us to put in freestanding steel poles. So when we looked at that cost, then it became cost-effective to just go ahead and move the wires and put in the conduit. And they were willing to work with us.
And in boring, we're not just boring one bore for each utility. We're able to match 2 or 3 together, or are we not?
Correct, yeah.
So how many bores are we
I think
looking
there's
at?
just going to be, I think there's 3 bores.
That's what I
It may
thought.
end up being 4, but I think there's 3.
Okay.
And it was 1 bore for each of the 6-inch pipes, and those are Pacific Powers pipes, and then a bore that's going to be a cluster of about 20 pipes. I think there was almost 25 or, there's a lot of conduit.
Okay, any more discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Kurt, if you could ask or answer, having witnessed the Nelscott project going on, I've noticed a lot of equipment gets staged during weekends and the like. Do we have an agreement with the Parks Department? Where is this equipment going to be stored while they're working? There's no shoulders to park it on and no vacant lots that I can see.
Yeah, and that's why they've requested, well, the Parks Department, not so much, but we were working closely with Kylo's because being a business and all. And that's why we were looking at the window of Thanksgiving through Christmas, that they would be willing to give up their parking lot, basically, for this bore pit to be put in and all the equipment associated with it. And then the other end of the bore pit comes up in the middle of the state park. And again, between Thanksgiving and Christmas is a pretty slow time for them, so they'd be able to close off a portion of the
So
park.
we have an agreement with them that's...
Yeah, and we're working closely with them, and everybody sort of agrees to that time frame. It just is the worst time frame to do construction in Lincoln City, but it won't be a muddy project like it would be in a lot of places because we have so much sand.
There's a lot of equipment involved, and it needs to be put somewhere. So.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I don't have a question, but, and I certainly don't want to step on any toes from the other counselors that were here during that process, which I wasn't, but I did try to follow it. As one of the new 4 counselors, I would really enjoy being able to review it and be a part of the final decision, since we're here now.
Well, that's what we're here talking about right now.
Yeah, I realize that.
Because the decision needs to be made now about whether we go on or not. And one of the reasons for that is the fact that it's a lengthy process to get the easements from, how many do we need, Kurt?
Yeah, I think there's about 12 easements that we need. Yeah,
12
and
easements. And
those wouldn't be able to be carried on probably for very long.
That's a lengthy process. So we need to make a decision, I think, tonight about whether or not we go forward. There's a motion on the floor to proceed, but with options, or to ask for options.
I'm going to withdraw that motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and the second, withdraw that, okay. Is there a motion to proceed?
I would so move that we proceed as Urban Renewal laid it out process.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Okay, there's a second. Any more discussion? All right, then, roll call, please.
Sprague,
Yes?
Walke, Ward,
No.
Williams,
No.
Norikis,
No.
and Ryan.
Yes.
Split.
It's a tie.
It's a tie.
So I guess we'll have to leave this for the next meeting. Let's go on to the next item, which is the business gap analysis, follow-on work.
Yeah, again, for the viewing audience, at the last meeting, you approved to move forward with the business gap analysis. We'll look at the different sectors of businesses that we have in town and see which ones we're weak on, and where we might be able to help us and the city, other partners in recruiting businesses to Lincoln City. In addition to that, there was the discussion about the follow-on work that they were willing to do that I had asked them about, and one of them was the big box analysis, because I knew that was information, that was a decision that was going to be coming up, and so I just kind of threw that in and saying, would you guys be able to provide this kind of information? And they said they would. And you have, and so that, and then local attractors, bringing more attractions to Lincoln City. So we threw that out there, and it sounded like there was some discussion about wanting to think of that, bring that forward for more discussion and maybe have some of that follow-on work done. Since that's happened, we received the information that Deb Martinson-Nicholson had done for the Planning Commission and for the City Council. And we read through it and thought it was great information. It was exactly what we were thinking needed to be done. It wasn't a, here's the answer. It was, here's both sides of the story, and now the City Council has some information to make a decision. So with that, given that, we also sent that off to the consultant and said, is there something else that you would be able to provide? And they said, no, this is exactly what we would have been able to provide. We would have looked up this, we wouldn't have tried to create the wheel. We would have just looked up the information and given you both sides of the story. They thought it was very, very well done. So we're actually recommending that you don't move forward with the follow-on work for the big box analysis, unless you thought there was some value to it, but we don't necessarily think so. We think you have that information, except for, it turns out that there's 2 of you that don't have the information, that haven't seen it before. So it was presented to the Planning Commission in October. So Mayor Williams and Mr. Davis was on the Planning Commission at the time, so they got that information. It was then given to the City Council, and so Mr. Ward and Ms. Walke were not on the City Council, or not on the agency or the City Council at that time, so they haven't seen it. So it's out there. We're more than happy to give it to them. It's probably best to come out of the Planning Department, but we have that. We have it now, and it's good information, and I think that everyone should know it before you go on making more decisions about big box. And if there's any questions on that, with that said, then, as far as the attractor, that's where I think we should focus our discussion tonight, is if you would like to commission this group to go on and do some additional work at looking for an attraction to Lincoln City. There has been some questions about this company. We don't really have any reservations about it, but about them and the work that they've done. But if there is some concern, there's nothing that's needs to be decided about this attractor thing right away. You could wait until the work got done that you've already approved on the business gap thing, and see if you're happy with that work, and then maybe decide to take the follow-on, or if you want to move forward with the follow-on right now, it's there and it's available, and they have they have time available to proceed with making some recommendations for us.
Okay. Any recommendation from
Mr. Chair,
council member?
On this, what you were just following about, the business gap analysis, are we talking about stores, restaurants, whatever, that people feel would be a good mix for the community to help fill out the community? Or I'm a little hazy on what we're talking about.
Okay, so there's 2 things. One is the analysis that you approved last week, and that is the business gap, where they would look at all the different business sectors in Lincoln City, compare them to other cities along the coast, similar size, and seeing if there's anything in there that we may be lacking in. And I'll go ahead and throw out the same examples that I've used several times, is that we have all these motel rooms, but I'm not sure that we have a motel supply warehouse in Lincoln City.
Right.
And why not? You know, why should they all be driven over here from Salem? And if we had one, maybe there would be motels in Newport that would rather buy from Lincoln City than the trucks that drive over from Salem.
Or a laundry.
Or a laundry, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So that sort of thing. And then along with that would be, we are unique in some ways. Would the business, they may come up with ideas for businesses that we're lacking that we have no demand for. And so they would be able to, those would be discounted, obviously, fairly quickly. But there may be areas where we're weak, so that the people that are doing economic development work has this information. It wasn't really anything that the city said, hey, we need this information. It was more the Lincoln County Economic Development Alliance, the Small Business Development Center that we meet with often. There's the Economic Development Committee. There's other groups. I think Chamber of Commerce, I guess, was the main one. Was, if we wanted to bring more business to town, what kind of businesses should we be looking at? And just to try to make those kinds of decisions. Be able to provide that information to those people. As you know, because the city isn't actually active out there looking to recruit businesses, but the Chamber certainly is, and the Small Business Development Center is always trying to tweak their curriculum to meet the needs of the city.
Well, in a later discussion here, you have about a downtown manager thing. Wouldn't that be something that person would be doing or working on? With the businesses, finding out, what other business they think might complement them, or something. I know when we put radio stations on the air years ago, you used to have to do a big survey of the community of what was missing, And when KCRF went on the air back in the 80s, one of the things that they discovered was that everybody was wanting a Mexican restaurant. And lo and behold, Adobe opened up shortly, right about that time. Hey, so these were the kind of things. It was driven by people wanting something that was totally different than they had an opportunity to have locally. And so I'm kind of curious. I mean, isn't that something that the Chamber or the downtown manager or the VCB or the Small Business Administration would be doing as opposed to the city? So I guess I'm.
Yeah, I think there's two things you're talking about. One is the analysis that's already been approved that I believe all of those people would be able to contribute to, be stakeholders in the discussion, but not really have the proprietary software in the background and things in order to go into that. And then the second thing is the downtown manager position that again was approved, but it isn't a city position. It's a grant that the agency is making to the Bay Area Merchants Association for them to hire someone on a part-time basis for a 2-year pilot program to work in the areas associated with the Bay Area merchants, which currently is the Nelscott District, the Taft District, and Cutler District. And so that person's focus will be on really the businesses that are there, but certainly a successful position would be somebody who would know what are the businesses that they might want to have in Taft as well. So I see them as two things.
I'm sorry to take up so much time on this, but if several years ago, one of the things that the city was able to do was get students from the University of Oregon city plan or city manager type school stuff, who would come as interns for their summer internship and do things like lay out Highway 101. I mean, we've all looked at the plans that they developed for the Nelscott area and so on and so forth over the years. And is that something that an internship type thing they could do? They could come over and analyze. I mean, that's what they're supposedly learning how to do, is analyze what's missing.
Sure.
That sort of thing.
Sure, absolutely. And it may be, of course, the Nelscott plan is pretty current, and the Cutler City plan is pretty current. So the Taft one is about 12 years out. So there's probably an argument out there, or a suggestion that it might be time to revisit the Taft plan. But that's basically what we've done is in that area of town especially is we have community vision plans for each of those communities.
No, I was speaking more of the city as a whole.
Yeah. It's been
I don't even know if they have that program anymore.
Yeah. There was someone that did that, way back in the
late
80s,
70s, early 80s.
Locke Bethune, remember Locke Bethune?
Yeah.
And did that. It did a sort of his thesis on Lincoln City, the streets of Lincoln City, and we were able to get him to come back, and he was a member of the Taft redevelopment plan So we had his work and his knowledge and his background, and it was kind of fun for him to come back and work with the consulting group. So it may be that the city would want to do that, but the agency would be hard-pressed on doing a city plan because of we're supposed to concentrate our effort in the district and not citywide. But the city may be interested in that.
Okay. I was just looking at some of the options.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we direct staff to hold off on the follow-on work until we get the business gap analysis project finished.
Is there a second?
Second.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't understand the motion.
Move that we direct staff to hold off on follow-on work, i.e. big box
Oh, okay.
and/or a tractor, until we get the business gap analysis project finished and see the results of that.
I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It carries. Okay, we're on to economic development discussion, which we've been doing.
Mr. Chair?
Kind of jumped.
Oh, good, finally, we can talk about economic development.
Mr. Chair, we're going to tag team a little bit, and I'm going to introduce this and then let Kurt talk about the details of things. In this discussion, we're really not asking for any decisions or things like that. It's mostly to just introduce a couple of topics to you. Over the course of the last month, as I have been visiting with you, with other people throughout the community, economic development has come up many times. And it's often in what has the city been doing, what is the role of the city versus what is the role of other businesses, and so forth. And so as I have been trying to put my arms around that and make sure I understood that, I thought I would summarize a little of what I've learned, make sure it meshes with what you think is going on, and then just talk about a few things that for you to consider in the future. This area, and I'm not going to say the city, but this area is really, from what I've been able to find, has had 5 different types of activities that would be defined as economic development. There, as Kurt had mentioned, there's an economic development committee that consists of a group of business residents that promote economic development. They are assisted by the city, primarily Kurt and Richard Townsend have been assisting them in that. I went to their meeting today, and there was quite a bit of discussion about visioning and what we ultimately want the city to look like. Lincoln County has an economic development employee that conducts economic development in Lincoln County and administers the enterprise zones throughout the county. There is a small business incubator program, which as I understand is operated by our local community college. And then from the city standpoint, our operation, there's been the urban renewal, which has primarily been for infrastructure improvement. There is the urban renewal projects that we have taken on, which Kurt has presented to you, and it's contained in the book that he gave to you. But there's also been, as you have in your packet, different loans, business expansions, energy efficiencies. They're tied to job creation. And then there is a program for financial assistance, as he mentioned, for the economic development downtown director. That's one where we are giving funding to another organization to conduct that. And then, of course, you have the VCB, which has been the promotion of tourism within the city. Those 5 things, as I've been able to identify, constitute what we would have economic development. Now, one of the things that we have discussed is that those have met with varying degrees of success, and but one of the things that we've talked about is that if somebody is interested in business attraction, okay, if we want to go out and bring a business in or to expand it, one of the things we've discussed is who do they go to? Who is the person that's going to assemble all of those? And that's something in our area-wide economic development activities we found that we haven't been able to find, is that there's one person that can assemble all the right people and sell this area, whether it's the city or the county, or just sell this area and say, this is why you should be here. As we've talked about the gap analysis, one of the questions that Kurt and I have discussed is that now when we get that, then what happens? What do you do with that document? Because those documents, along with demographic documents, are usually used to go out and sell your areas as to why you want people to locate into this area. And so one of the things that we wanted you to just begin to consider as we talk more in the future about economic development is what it actually means for the community. Is what we have been doing sufficient? We're a tourism community. The VCB we've already talked about. Is that where our main emphasis is going to be? Will it be in something other than infrastructure improvements, which is what the urban renewal is primarily focused on? Will it fall into what I consider the more traditional type of attraction and expansion of businesses? If that is something that you are interested in, there's a couple of really important things that need to take place. The first is to even define what that means. What it is, in the end, what it is you want to actually accomplish. Is it job creations? Is it wage increase? Is it the increase in income, the median income? Is it, there's a whole series of questions that would define what it is that it actually means. And whichever you select, that would determine a route the city would head down. The other thing that we wanted you to just be aware of and start considering is actually the urban renewal of the future. This urban renewal was set to expire last year, but it was extended for another 10 years. And as I understand it, the funding that is associated with urban renewal will finish sometime prior to that 10-year period ending. And so one of the things that we wanted to just bring up for you to begin considering is what will be the role of the urban renewal in the future. Will it simply expire when this urban renewal district expires? Do you want to look at creating another district and using the same tools that we have for another area of the community? Just ultimately where will this go? Right now there's plenty of time to consider that, and so we just simply wanted to introduce these couple of topics to you tonight as things to begin thinking about, and we plan with your permission to discuss these more in the future. And then Kurt, did you want to add anything into this? Why don't you just talk a little bit about your December?
What Mr. Chandler is referring to is where we were talking about our toolbox. We call this our economic development toolbox. There was some discussion in December about bringing on the new program, sort of through our local program support, when that would be the downtown manager deal. As you probably are aware, and I think, and you have it in your packet, this information here of, this was something that we put together with the help of an intern from the University of Oregon, actually. Which was tough for a beaver to do that. But he did a really good job, and what we did was came up with 25, I think there's 25 ideas in here in the toolbox of things that people are doing across the state in economic development, or they'd like to do if they could get anybody to say okay to do it, and a couple of things that we just thought of. And so those are always sitting out there, and as we get people coming forward and saying, hey, do you have something that can help us in this regard, then if that happens very often, then we want to come forward and at least let you know that that's happening and that there may be a desire. When we brought these forth, there was some question about, well, which ones do we want to bring forward? We'd had the rehabilitation loan program for quite a while doing facades. It was pretty successful, but we wanted to bring up some new ones, and so 3 of the 25 were selected to bring forth, and since then we brought forth another. So there are some things in here that would be worth considering maybe in the future. If it was something that this group would like to do, we could certainly plan a meeting around reviewing those and talking about them a little bit more, maybe tweaking them and seeing if there's something that you've heard of that might be helpful. I know we had a couple of conversation today about a couple of ideas about if somebody wanted to start up a business. We don't have ways to do that yet, but we have it in here. And a couple of those was if somebody walks in. We have people walk in the door, not every day, obviously, but often, and say, "Hey, we're new to town, we want to start a business," and that isn't necessarily the best way to start a business, but we don't have anything to offer a startup business. Everything we have is for existing businesses. Then one of the other ones in here is what we call our Welcome Home Entrepreneurs Program, and it was just an idea that if you're a kid that went to Taft High School or Seventh-day Adventist school, you went to school here in town, and you want to move back to town and start a business, or you want to stay in town and start a business, what can we offer a kid that wants to do that? And in this plan, it would be, we could pay their membership to be in the chamber and make sure they have a mentor at the Small Business Development Center, and here's the classes that you should take, and here's what you should really do, and here's some startup funding for doing that. And because these are people that know Lincoln City and are likely to stay in Lincoln City, and we have really good examples of many kids that have come out of the school system and have stayed here in town and are running great businesses. And so is there a way that we can help foster that sort of thing? Because I think any of you that have kids, raised them here in town and watched them fly away because the opportunities aren't here. Gosh, what can we do to help those opportunities? So that's one of the things that we've done, we have done in the past, and we're still willing to move it forward. There is this comprehensive economic development strategy that was put together by the Cascade West Council of Governments. I was a member of that committee. Chester is on the board of directors of the COG for the Cascade West Economic Development District, and this is one of the things that if you were going to start a business in Lincoln County, this is good demographic information and who to go to information about different types of things in the county. One of the other things I was just going to bring out, I hadn't brought it out in quite a while, and so some of you may not heard it, but in 2000, as you know, we did the TAF plan, and our goal was to spend 3 years and do as many of those projects in 3 years as we possibly could. We had plenty of money, and we were going to just crash Taft, and we did. As you know, the ones that were here, Taft was tore up for 3 years. But during that 3 years, we followed the progress of businesses that were, and again, if you've lived here a long time, you've realized that almost every single business, every single building in Taft on Highway 101 has gone through some type of renovation, either private money or public or our loan programs. And we're kind of happy about that. Again, not every single one of them, but almost every single one of them. It's really kind of remarkable when you think about it. In 3 years, the Urban Renewal Agency spent about $5.5 million on projects in the Taft area. We bought a $1.7 million worth of property. Public Works did $1 million worth of work. We had almost $2 million worth of ODOT grants to work in the Taft area. So that was about $7, $8, $9, $10 million that was spent in 3 years in the Taft area, and we monitored the progress of the businesses in the Taft area and could easily show that there was almost $6 million worth of private investment made in businesses and buildings in the Taft area during the time we were tearing it up. And we could document that there was 78 jobs that were created in the Taft area during the time that we did our work. It was right after that I took my first sabbatical, and when I came back in 2006, I believe it was, then and started kept going. We did it again, and again we went back and looked at the progress in the Taft area, and again we could see a remarkable change. It wasn't $6 million worth of change, but it was well over $1 million worth of change, and a few new jobs. Now, not every single business that created a new job was successful and survived for a period of time, but the fact that they were doing it while we were tearing things up was remarkable enough. But I think that it really shows that when there's public investment out there, there's private investment that follows. So what we've done for economic development, I mean, that may be the best that we can come up with at this point, is that we've tried to create the bones, the infrastructure that helps businesses want to locate in that area, and shows that we're willing to make a commitment here, and we're willing to support you if you make a commitment here. So Those are the three things, I guess, that I just wanted to throw out there about economic development and what we're doing. And feel free to ask any more questions, answer any of your questions, or take direction, even.
Chair?
Yes.
Has the agency ever done or ever thought about doing microloans where you take recently moved here people that don't have a lot of means and set them up in maybe they just need a lawnmower and a wheelbarrow and an old truck to start a landscaping business. Person has no means and no credit, but that's been done a lot in countries that are very, very poor with absolutely great success of helping someone pull themselves up. Plus, generally they do work that the the average population isn't willing to do, and does it well.
You know, I'm trying to think. I don't think there's anything like that on here. We do have a gap funding program available. That hasn't risen to the use level, but it's on our deal where if you are going to go borrow some money to do something, but you can only get so much, we can fill that gap so that you can get those loans. But what you're talking about, a micro enterprise program, I don't see that, but I think it sounds like it would be an easy one to implement and a low cost.
Yeah, it won the World Prize for Economics or something 3 years ago. It's not just crazy thing. And the payback rate is over 90%. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Kurt, are you looking for approval for the downtown manager position? Is that what we're considering here?
No, that's already been approved.
I
So
thought
the only thing we're doing here is the city manager wanted to allow for some discussion because we sort of ended the meeting on this economic development note and didn't get enough time to finish the discussion, and you wanted to make sure that you had time to finish the discussion. And if you wanted to go somewhere with it, I think what he's talking about is, what do you think economic development is? And based on the answer to that, is there something that urban renewal can do to facilitate that, or is it something the city would take on as a priority? Because it wouldn't be anything that the urban renewal agency could take on as a citywide economic development director position, because we're only 18% of the city and wouldn't be able to fund that and with a straight face.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
One of the things that I've long thought or advocated that we need a central place where Joe Smith in Kalamazoo decides he's been here on vacation, he'd really like to open up a business here, and what kind of businesses are lacking, what is there a vacant property, what's, all the various things you want to know about when you move. And I've often thought that we need to have some coordinated thing, entity, committee, whatever, whether it's urban renewal or city, that can get that information to them, tailored for their particular question, but utilizing the general information that we have. I'm reminded of when you and I, somebody else, went and visited with the downtown manager at McMinnville several years ago. One of the things that she was telling us is she was walking around downtown and found some pieces of property that were underutilized, and heard through the grapevine that a bakery was looking for, from Portland or someplace else, was looking for a new home, and she convinced them to come into one of these underutilized pieces of property in downtown McMinnville, and it's become a very highly successful bakery, and expanded, I think, into a grocery store and a bunch of other things. And so I think there's an argument for that kind of coordination by some entity, and I don't know whether it's rightly done through urban renewal or through the city, but I would like to see something created. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a paid position. It could be of our retired people who do, have backgrounds in marketing, could be coordinating this. I think it's just so important that we have one place where people can coordinate or go to and get information. We have all the information around here, but we have no coordinator. Anyway, I mean, I don't know if that helps. I don't even know if that's a function of urban renewal, but it's something that I think that we sorely lack as a community is a way to respond to people, to put our best face forward and try to get people to come into town with businesses. And I like this micro business thing. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, that just makes flat out good sense.
Yeah.
That would be something that, I don't know, again, whether the urban renewal or the city would do, but I think that's a program that needs to be looked at and implemented as soon as we can. I think that's just a yeah.
I think that that program would be best handled by urban renewal. But I think what you were talking about with overall citywide economic development needs to be handled by the council, since the urban renewal is only 18% of the...
Right, but I mean, I'm just saying, yeah, I think that and I don't think it has to be necessarily a paid position. We have an awful lot of retired people that are semi-retired, looking for things to do, and so, you might find somebody out there that has some marketing savvy that would be really interested in doing something like that. Anyway.
I think you're absolutely right, and that's what we've talked about is this clearinghouse. There is no clearinghouse for the information you have. I think that the planning department does an excellent job of compiling a lot of the information that you were talking about, vacant space, what types of businesses. I think between the two of us, we sort of funnel people back and forth. If they hear about urban renewal has money available, they come to us first. If they have other questions, they go to the community development department. So I think Richard Townsend does a great job of putting that information together. But again, I don't think it's well known that that's a place to do it, and that's not really what he's focused on accomplishing.
And there is some room in this building that we could create an office.
Yeah.
Any other questions, discussion? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Kurt? We have no public hearings and we have no resolutions, so we're down to agency member questions. Anyone have a comment or a question down here?
I think I've commented enough for one night.
On this side? All right, then we are adjourned.